I don't know about you, but I'm mad as heck, and I'm pretty ticked off. And you know, when I hear President Obama say things like, we're on the right track, the economy is recovering, we saved or created 400,000 jobs, what the heck does that mean? Does anyone know what that means, saved or created? I don't. When they talk about fear of a double-dip recession, I don't think we're past the first dip yet. You know, they lie and they tell these stories, and it's incredible. And I think we're now on the precipice of a peaceful revolution. That's where we are. After last September's Tea Party, I needed to do something myself. I felt like I just needed to do something. The first thing I thought of was education. I needed to know more about the Constitution. I knew others needed to know more about the Constitution. So I thought to organize this class where I could do the research, I could bring the information to the class, and then people would come to the class, and I could learn from them, they could learn from me, and like Al said, it ends up being a discussion group, because I'm certainly no constitutional scholar, but I'm very interested in learning, and the people that come to the class are as well. General Constitution topics are covered, as well as local issues. One session we had on the Calaveras County General Plan, Mike and Tonya were there, and they're going to give a presentation later today on Alternative D. I don't know if you guys are going to talk about Alternative D, but basically property rights. Last month we covered Obamacare. We talked about the individual mandate versus the Commerce Clause. And we hear a lot about the Commerce Clause nowadays because the Obama administration wants to use that as a catch-all to pass everything under the sun. We talked about how Obamacare is not about health care. It's about big government control. We have a big, fat, bloated government, and it's getting bigger and fatter. And I think we can fight this obesity with knowledge, and that's what we have to do for each other and for ourselves, is gain more knowledge. Yeah, we are at the precipice of a peaceful revolution, and we're all involved, all of us, and we all must stay involved, and we must stay engaged. I encourage you to start or participate a constitutional discussion group, either come to ours in Valley Springs or start another one. I know that Donna was talking about starting one in Arnold. Her first one will probably be in October, around the October time frame. She said after the Tea Party. But the way I started it, and if you're interested in starting it, is I used Hillsdale College. I don't know if you're familiar with Hillsdale College, but they're a constitutional college. And they have a constitutional town hall that they did in January, and they have a series called Reviving the Constitution. And basically, it's 5 videos they have that are about an hour long, hour and a half, and they talk about the founding fathers, the founding principles, the Constitution in general, the Civil War in the Constitution, So if you wanted to start a class, that's the way I started, because I'm a mathematician. I'm not a historian, and it was very helpful for me to be able to rely on these videos. And it gives everyone in the class the necessary background, because you have to start somewhere, and it gives everyone kind of a starting point. There is an excellent reader that accompanies, or that you can download from Hillsdale's website. It's called the Town Hall Reader. It's got the Constitution, some Federalist Papers, some writings by Alexis de Tocqueville, and other things. It's a good reader. It's a good reference book, and this is downloadable from Hillsdale's website as well. And if you want to start individually by yourself, just go to the website. The videos are there, and the reader's there. You could do it all on your own if you wanted to. Also, I encourage everyone here, if you haven't already, read Mark Levin's book, Liberty and Tyranny. This is an excellent book. It basically explains. It helps you understand how we got here and how we can win back our country. Mark Levin is a constitutional attorney. He worked in the Reagan White House, and he has amazing ability to explain things to non-lawyers so that we all can understand it. And he's actually entertaining, too, if you ever listen to his radio show. Let me give you an example of the empowerment of knowledge. A couple of weeks ago, Senator Lindsey Graham, he's a Republican, well, sort of Republican from South Carolina, he proposed hearings on a constitutional amendment that would prohibit birthright citizenship. Now, you've all heard of birthright citizenship. If you're born here, you're a citizen. And they rely on the 14th Amendment for that. But I contend, and others do as well, that it does not require a constitutional amendment. What it requires is simply legislation, which is a lot easier to get passed than a constitutional amendment. A constitutional amendment takes 2/3 of the states to ratify. It's practically impossible to do. So let's examine the 14th Amendment for a moment. Hang in there with me. I know it might get a little bit dry, but I'll try to keep it interesting. In particular, Section 1, and I'm quoting, "All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside," end quote. And Section 5 of the same amendment, "The Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article." More precisely, does this amendment give birthright citizenship? Is that what you hear in there? I don't quite hear that. Some believe that our forefathers had in mind some sacred constitutional right where you could sneak across the border at 9 months pregnant, give birth in a U.S. hospital, and receive welfare for you and your family for the rest of your life. This is absurd, but it's happening. They use the 14th Amendment to justify it. But if you look into the 14th Amendment, it was actually added right after the Civil War during the Reconstruction period. And it was passed in order to overrule the Dred Scott decision. And the Dred Scott essentially deemed slaves not citizens. So basically it was to make the emancipated slaves citizens. Let's reread the section again. "All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States." So what is meant by jurisdiction? We have to look at that word. What's meant by jurisdiction? Back in 1868, when this was written, America was not a massive welfare state. It was not a magnet for frauds and cheats and lawbreakers as it is today. Yet amazingly, the author of the 14th Amendment considered its effect on the children of aliens. The author's name was Senator Jacob Howard of Michigan, and he expressly said this. This is a quote. "This will not, of course, include persons born in the United States who are foreigners, aliens, who belong to the families of ambassadors or foreign ministers. Jurisdiction," that's the end of the quote, "jurisdiction meant sole allegiance to the author. In fact, the 14th Amendment excluded Indians who did not pay tax and who were subject to tribal jurisdiction. Clearly, they were born within the geographical confines of the United States, but they bore allegiance to their tribe. In an 1884 case, Elk versus Wilkins, the Supreme Court ruled that the 14th Amendment did not confer citizenship on Indians because they were subject to tribal jurisdiction, not U.S. jurisdiction. Now, isn't that interesting? With this in mind, why would anyone conclude that children born in the U.S. to illegal aliens should be conferred citizenship? It doesn't make any sense. Clearly, this is not what was intended by the 14th Amendment. But for 100 years, this is how it stood as the author intended. And there was one case in between there with one caveat that children born to gainfully employed legal permanent residents would also be deemed citizens under the 14th Amendment. Now pay attention. It matters that we have constitutionalists on the Supreme Court. It matters. In 1982, the liberal judicial activist Justice Brennan added a footnote to his opinion on the case Plyler versus Doe. And in it he stated, quote, No plausible distinction with respect to 14th Amendment jurisdiction can be drawn between resident aliens whose entry into the United States was lawful and resident aliens whose entry was unlawful, end quote. What about the lawful and unlawful part? To me, that's a pretty clear distinction between the two. Obviously, the illegal alien has no regard for the law and therefore, by his own actions, is not under the jurisdiction of the United States. Now notice this as well. This was a footnote to an opinion. This was not argued before the court. America is being governed by Brennan's 1982 footnote. Does this need a constitutional amendment to change? I don't think so. Again, Section 5 of the 14th Amendment states, "The Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article," end quote. Also, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution states, "The Congress shall have the power to establish an uniform rule of naturalization. Thus, no constitutional amendment is necessary. It's a matter of legislation." And legislation is a lot easier, like I said, a lot easier than a constitutional amendment. This shows by example what power we have in knowledge. With this knowledge, you can write or talk intelligently to your congressman and tell them that we don't need a constitutional amendment. You can tell your friends, you can tell your neighbors, you can teach this to your friends and your neighbors, and they can write to their congressman and tell them we don't need a constitutional amendment. We can educate our representatives. They are not the elite omnipotence that some like to think of themselves. Yes, we are on the precipice of a peaceful revolution. Through knowledge and action, we have the power. Through our vote, we have the power. Join our discussion group or start your own. We must stop this big, fat, bloated government from encroaching on our liberties. Let's all join together and save this great nation.
Yes. Thank you.